It's a clear and simple ultimatum. Comply with U.S. audit inspections or lose access to U.S. capital. And U.S.-listed Chinese firms that do not comply could be delisted or kicked off U.S. stock exchanges as of the end of next year, if Washington has its way. The ultimatum is among recommendations from the Trump administration to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission to subject Chinese companies to the same audit inspections as American firms. It follows similar legislation the U.S. Senate passed in May that would also bar U.S. initial public offerings by Chinese firms unless they comply.
Dealing with Chinese companies and their special problems should always have been on the agenda of the SEC. They've been having problems with China-based companies going back about 8 years.
The U.S. has had limited regulatory oversight of U.S.-listed Chinese firms, partly because Chinese national security law prohibits foreign access to audits of China-based companies, but also because of Wall Street's massive appetite for Chinese stocks.
The SEC has not been able to do anything because Wall Street is very powerful, and the SEC's budget is controlled by people in the Senate, and the people in the Senate listen to what Wall Street has to say because Wall Street makes campaign contributions. And so the SEC has not wanted to take strong steps against China-based companies because it would cut off IPOs, which are a huge source of revenues for investment banks and law firms in Wall Street.
At stake is nearly $2 trillion, the estimated combined value of more than 200 Chinese firms listed here, as the new rules could drive Chinese companies elsewhere.
Chinese companies who haven't yet conducted IPOs are thinking, obviously, first about their onshore market, the A-share markets of Shanghai and Shenzhen, and increasingly a NASDAQ-like market called STAR, the science and technology market in Shanghai. The companies who are qualified to stay the course and list in China have more seriously considered it now, but it's extremely difficult to list in China, make no mistake. That's why Chinese companies then would revert to Hong Kong.
The latest push to tighten rules for Chinese companies was brought on by two key catalysts: the multi-billion-dollar fraud scandal by NASDAQ-listed Chinese company Luckin Coffee in the spring that roiled capital markets, and deepening tensions between Washington and Beijing over a wide range of issues, including trade, security, and the handling of the coronavirus pandemic. Recent escalation saw the U.S. closing the Chinese consulate in Texas for allegedly stealing intellectual property, criticizing China over Hong Kong's security law, and moves to ban Chinese apps TikTok and WeChat.
What these Chinese-American tensions have done is they've created political space to do what, in my view, is right from the point of view of U.S. investors, which is to restrict the ability of firms that are unreachable by the U.S. legal system from listing here.
The argument for the change is that while it could hurt U.S. investors and exchanges in the short term, it could benefit everyone in the long run.
If you're going to take a market like China and in some way exclude them from participating in this market, that's a competitive disadvantage. Now, on the other hand, your markets have to have integrity. They've got to be compliant. Everyone has to play by the rules.
Wall Street may be lobbying against the legislation, but Main Street is hedging its bet on some measure of a game change, especially since there is bipartisan support for leveling the playing field. I'm Li Lingtan for CGTN, New York.